By 1960, to make it stay that way, they're soon reinforcing the frontier with automatic guns and with mines. Escapers can no longer burst through or dig under the wall. They'll have to find other ways out of East Germany. And they will. Crazier, more dangerous, and more spectacular than ever. In 1961, East Germany had sealed its own borders with barbed wire and concrete to save itself from economic collapse. For 10 years, they reinforced this frontier until it became almost impenetrable. In May 1971, a new dictator comes to power, Erich Honecker. He looks like a modern European leader, but the wall is still the public symbol of his absolute state control. He now makes the border even more deadly, with automatic guns and minefields. For any East German who still wants to escape, it seems impossible. And the Cold War is heating up. In the 1970s, the Soviet Union stations nuclear missiles in East Germany. The Americans plan to do the same in West Germany.
Very few politicians in West Germany ever thought Germany would be reunited, at least in anybody's lifetime.
In East Germany, Honecker benefits from the superpower rivalry. And things have been getting better in the GDR. It's become the shop window of the socialist world. Apparently proof that communism works.
Fridges, washing machines, TV sets. The beginnings of a modest prosperity, in other words, started to occur in the mid-60s with the population stabilized, the educated parts of the population no longer going off to West Germany. You had a situation where people could feel life was not too bad.
The regime can feel secure too. They and their state are very well protected. Every young man has to serve in the People's Army. They face the enemy in the West and their own people who want to cross the border. Ingo Bethge is a border guard.
Basically, anyone who tries to cross the frontier is breaking the law. He is a criminal. He has to be resisted with every possible means. Of course, no one actually said we must shoot to kill, but if we did, they certainly approved.
Ingo Bethge is himself a criminal because he wants to escape from East Germany. May the 26th, 1975. He will escape at night with a friend. Ingo has served here. He knows this section of the border perfectly.
Of course, they would have fired. But you have to aim, too. A Kalashnikov isn't accurate, but it has 30 rounds. You get through that in a couple of seconds.
Bethge knows the terrain. After the border area comes the frontier fence with its death strip, and then the River Elbe with its patrol boats. It's a formidable barrier.
It was a sense of adventure. I wanted to see the country the Beatles came from. There must be something on the other side of the wall, but it was off limits. We just wanted to be able to go wherever we liked.
He knows the guards could come back at any time. Now comes the next obstacle, the minefield.
The only time I really got scared was in the minefield. I'd heard that if you stepped on a mine, part of your foot was blown off, maybe up to the ankle, but not the whole leg. We had a small paddle. If we slap that down and a mine explodes, we should be okay, but then we'll have to hurry. That was the only time I sweated a bit. Apart from that, it was nice and dark. Nobody saw us.
Next task, blowing up their airbeds on the banks of the River Elbe.
The Elbe has a very fast current. Swimmers quickly get carried away. There are eddies and everybody's scared of them. I didn't want to drown, so bringing the airbeds was a good idea.
They paddle for half an hour.
At first, we thought the other bank would never get any closer. It was dark. We paddled like madmen, and suddenly we'd made it. And there was a customs bus right in front of us. We said, "Hello?" And they said, "Where have you come from? Isn't it a bit cold for swimming?" And we said, "Yes, it is really, but we've just escaped from the GDR." They took us back to their guardhouse and gave us something hot to drink and eat, and we were lucky because it all worked out.
Most escapers are arrested and imprisoned. Some are killed. Ingo Bethge is one of the few who make it across the Elbe. Ingo's family. He's left 2 brothers behind. He'll try to get them out too. For a guard unit, a successful escape is a humiliation. Every case is investigated, and the system is constantly reinforced. By now, these are the obstacles to getting over the wall. The watchtower, the rear wall, the bed of nails, the electrified barbed wire fence, dogs, alarm wires, and there's a trap for the guards too.
The brushed sand, for instance, would show footprints. So in other words, if you're up in your guard tower and you see somebody trying to cross and you choose at that point to look away and hope that nobody notices and the person gets through safely to the western side, that will not be the case, because when somebody's escaped, obviously there'll be a huge inquiry and they will see the footprints in the sand next to your guard tower and they will know exactly what went on, and you will be in deep, deep trouble.
The East German state is strong. Erich Honecker has forced his people to respect him. Now he wants the world to recognize his country.
On the one hand, they were seeking respectability. They wanted to be seen as a state that functioned, that was on an equal basis with all other states. But at the same time, they didn't actually want to allow their own citizens the freedoms that membership of the international community allowed.
Détente is the magic word. In the 1970s, there's a series of important international agreements.
All's well that ends well.
At last, the regime has won full recognition throughout the world, in exchange for signing away a little more freedom to its citizens.
Technically, they were now allowed freedom of movement, freedom to choose where they worked, freedom of expression. The communist governments would frequently sign these manifestos and international agreements and simply not allow them to be carried out on their own soil.
Instead, they build the wall even higher. Erich Honecker is completing the next stage of the wall. Bigger, broader, and more terrifying. Because 1,000 people are still escaping every year. L-shaped concrete slabs weighing 3 tons, topped off with a concrete cylinder that's impossible to grip. Most people have given up thoughts of escape. But not all.
I couldn't travel where I liked. I couldn't say what I liked. If you told a political joke, you had to expect to go to prison. It was that simple.
Peter Strelzig lives in Thüringen, 50 kilometers from the border. He's an engineer and an inventor. He knows at ground level the wall is impenetrable, but he comes up with an ingenious and daring solution: a balloon.
A gas balloon would be better, because you wouldn't see the flame. But where do you get hydrogen or helium? There's nothing else for it. Hot air.
They will have to travel 30 kilometers from Lobenstein in East Germany to just over the border. July the 3rd.
We were ready for takeoff. The burner had heated up the air. I started to feel a bit queasy.
I gave it a good blast on the burner, and we slowly rose over the trees. I wanted to get as high as possible, because I was afraid they might shoot. They might shoot at us.
Then, at about 1,200 meters, the balloon flew into a cloud, and the canopy started absorbing water. And we began to sink, fast.
They crash land in some woods. But where?
We didn't know. Are we in West Germany, or are we still in the East?
Then they see some depressing signs.
I'll never forget this. There was a box on a tree stump with lots of wires round it. I wondered if it was some kind of alarm, or maybe an automatic machine gun.
These alarms and booby traps are a sure sign they're still on the eastern side of the border.
And then we just burst into tears. We were so near, just 200 meters to go, but we're still here. Nothing has changed.
They abandon the balloon. And it's discovered by an off-duty East German policeman.
I'd gone looking for mushrooms, and I saw the balloon hanging there. But I didn't say anything, because they would have pulled me in, and they would have told me off. What were you doing there? You have no business to be there. They wouldn't have praised me. They would have kicked me in the arse.
17 days later, the Stasi find the balloon. And local cop Egon Matjasik, this time on duty, is called in to guard the site.
I was detailed to seal off the crime scene. I had a really good look at the balloon.
I left my photo album behind, but I went back to fetch it, and then in the rush, I forgot my medicines.
I saw the Stasi writing down the numbers, so maybe they could trace the perpetrators that way. If I'd reported it earlier, they would have started the search much sooner. About 2 weeks had gone by.
The Stasi appealed for information in a newspaper. Stasi secret police headquarters in Berlin. Information floods in here, but it never comes out. Escape attempts are bad news. Thousands of people are working here to stop them.
So we nip these things in the bud. We do not want more people being shot crossing the wall. We got them never to get to the wall in the first place. So the huge expansion of the Stasi to become possibly the most numerous per head of population, and in many ways, in a ghastly way, successful secret police force in history.
They file reports on every escape attempt, every anti-government statement, every tiny detail. Meanwhile, the Stasi are following the trail of evidence. Fabric from the balloon, medicines, a wrench. It's only a matter of time before the trail leads to the Strelsigs.
Whenever a car drove by outside, oh, I hope it's not the police. Oh yes, that was a scary time.
But they're determined to build a new balloon as fast as they can. And another family, the Wetzels, are coming along. Now there will be 4 adults and 4 children.
It's got to be bigger. There are 4 more of us now. We've got to buy the fabric. The whole thing has to start all over again.
We couldn't buy it all in one go. They would have found us out for sure. So we bought the fabric in small amounts in all sorts of different shops.
We needed 1,240 square meters. That's enough for a small circus tent.
He started sewing again up in our bedroom, day and night. He even sewed in his sleep.
They sew every spare minute for 6 weeks. September the 16th, 1979.
We said, the wind is so perfect. If it's ever going to work, it'll be tonight.
A hidden clearing in the forest will be the takeoff point.
There was dead silence, not a sound, nothing. All you could hear was the burner when they fired off some gas. But apart from that, there was no sound, absolute silence.
Shortly after takeoff, they were spotted by the guards at the control point.
Suddenly we noticed that in the direction we were making for, we could see searchlights.
They had the perfect opportunity to shoot it down. And one of the guards at the control point wanted to get the order to shoot. And he called Berlin. And they gave him the order. But by then, the balloon had gone.
And then it began to stutter and pop, and the gas was finished. The flame went out, and then we could see up into the canopy. And there was a long gash at the top, right in the middle.
I'd made one mistake. I'd fired the burner full blast and burned a hole in the canopy 25 meters above, and that was damn dangerous.
From that moment, we just went down. We couldn't heat the air anymore. Luckily, the balloon was a bit bigger than it needed to be, and so it worked a bit like a parachute. And that slowed us down.
I just hoped that they wouldn't drag us out half dead. I made peace with myself. You can't imagine how calm you can be at moments like that.
I take a look around with the torch, and I see the tops of the fir trees rushing towards us. And then I hear a cracking sound.
The first time it took us 34 minutes, and the second time it was just 28 minutes. And because of that, I thought we hadn't made it this time either.
We just stepped out onto the road and stopped a car. And who got out but 2 policemen? The first question we asked was, are we in the West?
And he said, where else would you be? Because they were pretty surprised too.
And so then we knew we'd done it. So, of course, we all ran around like crazy, hugging and kissing. One big celebration.
All the Stasi can do is put everything into the files and reconstruct the crime. The Streltsik family's escape makes headlines all over the world.
Freedom is, I believe, the most valuable thing a human being can possess. But the only people who know that are people who've had to live without it. If you've grown up free, you don't know what it means.
West Berlin, freedom and department stores overflowing with goods. The dream of the West at the start of the 1980s. By comparison, East Germany is grey.
The GDR could never stabilize the situation so that the people were happy, with no shortages and a little bit of liberalization, because the West was always breathing down its neck as an unwelcome comparison.
Temptation lies just over the wall. Meanwhile, East Germany celebrates its 30th anniversary. The East offers parades, ceremony, and familiarity.
Most of them didn't want to risk their lives just to get over to the West. Most of them thought, well, life might be better over there, but I live here. There might be problems with our life, but maybe we'll improve at living here. There was not, as is often thought in the West, a great climate of hatred and feeling of oppression. There was not this feeling of being imprisoned in a society.
There was one thing they hated.
Most people are very, very aware that Germans in the West had become great travellers. And they really felt very bad that the best they could hope for was maybe a week in Lake Balaton in Hungary, or perhaps a trip to Prague.
Building and guarding the wall takes a big chunk out of East Germany's gross national product. A fortune that Honecker no longer possesses by the 1980s. And the frontier is never finished.
The wall was a big imposition on a country which often struggled financially. It may have cost as much as $1 billion a year to maintain over the 28 years that followed.
$1 billion Deutschmarks, $500 million a year. And it still can't stop people escaping. People with crazy ideas, like Holger Bethke. The Bethke family. Eldest brother Ingo swam across the river to freedom. 8 years later, his youngest brother Holger wants to join him in the West.
We put on maintenance men's kit and wore overalls. We attached a meter rule to the bow so it looked like a measuring rod, and we wound the steel cable around a big drum as though we had come to work in this building. If anyone saw us on the staircase on the way up to the attic, we could say, "We're working here."
The date is March 31st. Holger will shoot while his brother Ingo waits in the West to retrieve the line.
I just heard a ping and thought, oh damn, it's landed in a tree. And when they tugged at it, I saw something moving. I looked closer at the tree and I saw it. Man, oh man, I've got it. And then the two of them were over the moon. I got hold of it and I began to pull.
The steel cable is attached to the nylon cord and pulled over.
The idea was to tie it to the car and stretch it tight, because then we'd have more pulling power.
The homemade pulley is attached.
I don't know if I looked down. I must have been so wound up. I think I only looked forwards. You've got to make it. You've got to make it. I hope no one shoots. I hope no one notices. About 3 meters short of the building in West Berlin, I stopped. It wouldn't go any further. There was a short gap left.
20 meters above the death strip, with no safety net.
The border strip was incredibly brightly lit. They had arc lights every 10 to 15 meters, pointing downwards. So if you looked up from a watchtower, you saw a glaring white light, and beyond that you probably couldn't see anything at all. Of course, we hoped those bright border lights would help a bit, because we were above them, so they wouldn't see us right away. And then I saw my pal come rolling after me. We'd finally done it. We were in the West.
They found a blind spot between 2 towers. Then the East Germans built a new tower to make sure it couldn't happen here again.
So you could say that later my brother got his own watchtower.
The Wall. For a few artists, this is the biggest canvas on Earth, the East Side Gallery. Seen from the west, it's as loud as West Berlin. A tourist attraction, separating 2 worlds, West and East. Erich Honecker still makes great claims for his republic.
Everyone has his place in the German Democratic Republic, regardless of his political views and his religion.
The prisons are full of critics who think differently from the regime. What's the state to do when it has too many dissidents? And is bankrupt.
You work out a deal with the West Germans whereby you sell them dissidents. In other words, you stick these people in jail, and then you do a deal and say, we'll let you have these people in exchange for Westmarks, the precious Westmark.
West Germany buys people's freedom for up to $50,000 each. Selling thousands of dissidents actually helps East Germany avert bankruptcy. And there are huge loans from the West. But with one condition: the booby-trap guns on the border have to go. It's an acceptable deal for Honecker.
In fact, about 35,000 were allowed out. So you can see how this monster that they created through this combination of wanting to get rid of these dissidents and at the same time make a profit from it had started to expand to such an extent that it was completely undermining the whole basis of the country.
Much of the money earned selling people is swallowed up by the border fortifications on land and on the northern Baltic coast. Some will challenge security here as well. Dirk Deckert and his friend Carsten Klunder want to try something really wild.
The urge to live in a country where I could simply do what I want. Where there's no one to tell me, you can go there, but you can't go there. That urge was so strong in those days that I risked my life for it.
There are no fast windsurf boards in the GDR, so they have to build their own. They're going to be surfing a long way. They need storm force winds from the northeast to take them 70 kilometers from the island of Rügen to Denmark.
And the conditions were so perfect, we suddenly said, we go tomorrow.
4 a.m. on November the 25th, through the banned security zone, into the breakers for the first time.
I ripped the side of my suit, and right away I noticed that some pretty cold water was coming in.
The water temperature is 6 degrees centigrade. Without protection from the cold, the crossing is suicidal.
I'm not going to stay here and die. I'd better get back. So I go back to land and my head starts spinning. What now? Carsten's on his way and I'm stuck here.
As soon as I got going, I kind of said goodbye to my life. I thought, okay, if something happens, that's how it is. You have to. Otherwise, you're so scared you can't do anything right.
Carsten surfs for 4 hours.
Then a sort of lethargy set in. I was just functioning. But as soon as I spotted land, all my strength came flooding back. All the way across, I kept wondering what had happened to Dirk. Did he manage to get going? Has something happened to him? Maybe they caught him.
I knew they were sure to notice something was up, and then they'd start looking for me. I knew time was running out. I just hoped I was moving faster than they were.
The next morning, after fixing his wetsuit, Dirk starts his second run.
I made sure I surfed carefully. I was afraid something might break or I'd get hurt. Even then, I knew I might not make it. The Baltic isn't as big as all that, but when you surf in the same direction for an hour, you lose sight of land, and it doesn't matter how deep it is or how close the land is. If you drown, you drown. Then there were more and more fishing boats, and it was pretty clear I was getting into coastal waters.
The fishermen are already looking for a second surfer.
I had them say Carsten Klinder's name, and I realized they knew my name. From then on, it was just indescribable. After the strains of the last 48 hours, that I could be so happy. They sent a radio message saying they'd picked me up.
But was it worth it?
If I'd known the wall was going to fall in 3 years, the border was going to open, I wouldn't have done it. I'd have waited out the 3 years.
Dirk and Carsten give their first interview in the West to a surf magazine. But how can East Germany protect itself against such daring escapes? Only by developing more spectacular and refined methods of their own.
And in fact, by the 1980s, they were planning a high-tech war, which in essence would be the computer technology by this point, and was such that they could envisage making a high-tech war where relatively little human intervention would be involved, and people wouldn't even be able to get near it without being picked up by the various sensors and cameras.
This was Erich Honecker's Wall 2000. Infrared, laser, and vibration detectors would trigger alarms when they sense an escaper. Automatic cameras and searchlights home in, and chemical sprays disable them. Green bushes will make the wall look benign and bucolic. 1985, there's a new man in the Kremlin. Mikhail Gorbachev begins talking peace. It's very attractive. American President Ronald Reagan is determined to regain the initiative. He comes to Berlin in July 1987.
Just this picture, which has been reproduced millions of times of him standing there in front of the Brandenburg Gate was as dramatic an effect as you could have. And so we more than achieved our goals with the speech.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Reagan was the first president in a long time who didn't see the Cold War continuing forever. He had at least a hope that it would be temporary, that the Cold War would end, the Soviet Union would end, and the Cold War would be over and the US would win it.
In this thaw between East and West, Honecker visits his counterpart in West Germany, Helmut Kohl, the ultimate recognition for the little brother.
We respect the existing frontiers, but we want to overcome this division on a path of peaceful understanding and freedom.
Just words?
Erich Honecker tried so long to keep a tight hand on things because he knew that he couldn't afford to just relax slightly, because as soon as he relaxed, East Germany would go. It would just melt away.
The Bethge family is at it again. The last of the three brothers is still in the East, Egbert. In 1989, escaped kings Ingo and Holger want to fly back over the wall to get Egbert out using 2 planes.
First, we bought one microlight and taught each other to fly. We got into all kinds of scrapes. We must have bust 3 propellers and sent a few engines to the junkyard, and we broke a wing too. You know, learning by doing.
Even if they carried on building the wall and made it even higher, there would always be people who wanted to cross.
One plane will land in Treptow Park in East Berlin and pick up their brother Egbert, while the other patrols in the sky above. Egbert approves.
I thought the idea was fantastic. Fly over the wall, land, and fly back. Seemed like a pretty good idea. I liked it.
They've thought of every detail.
We stuck red stars under the wings and another one at the back. We hoped that would give us the advantage of surprise over the border guards.
They know the border guards are not allowed to shoot at air targets without permission.
So we thought. A border guard sees us at 4 a.m. He calls his company commander and drags him out of bed. And he calls the battalion commander. And he calls the Russians. And it takes forever.
Until someone calls back, and by that time we're long gone.
May the 26th, 1989. A West Berlin sports field.
We drove the truck to the field. And at midnight we started unloading the planes. We put them together and dismantled them so often that we were pretty good at it.
They switch on the cameras attached to their planes and film the entire flight. 4:22 a.m.
We were nervous, but as soon as we took off, it all fell away. It was stressful, though. I had to raise my visor because I couldn't see a thing. It was so dark.
They tried to contact Egbert by radio.
Once we'd taken off, we started asking over the air, "Are you there?"
I had to watch out. I was in a bush near the path, and I couldn't see out because of all the leaves. Everything was covered, and if someone had come past by chance walking their dog and heard a voice in the bush and called the police, so I had to speak very quietly. Ingo, can you hear me?
And suddenly I heard his crackly voice. Yes, I'm here, and we knew, thank God, he's there.
Okay, copy, we're on the way. Yep, I'm okay too.
Then they knew I was here, and I knew they were coming, but I didn't hear a thing from them until they were airborne.
Of course we're on the way. I can see the wall in front of me. Over. Okay, I'll wait.
The rendezvous is in East Berlin's Treptow Park. Then they see something big on their runway.
We were surprised to see that there was a travelling circus in the park. It must have been set up at the weekend. The field was just about big enough to land in, with this little Russian traveling circus standing there.
Further back.
Ingo, I think I can see you. When should I come out?
I landed somewhere at the end of the field. Egbert jumped out of the bush and I yelled, "Careful, don't walk into the propeller," because of course he was even more excited than I was.
I ran round the propeller, sat down in the seat and shouted, "Go, Ingo, go!" I was really excited.
I said, cool it, we don't want you falling out."
I said, "Come on, take off, go, go," because I was still scared that a cop car would come by. And they drive straight off the road into the park.
And then I hit the gas and we took off again.
The trees were coming closer and closer because we were twice as heavy, and I weighed 80 kilos then.
I completed one circuit and they were down there in front of me, taking off.
As we took off, I had to think about my friends, my parents, and I was a bit sad then. I was incredibly happy when we were a meter above the ground, flying to freedom. But there was a sadness too, because at that time you had to assume that you'd never see them again.
3 brothers reunited in the sky over Berlin.
I thought, now we've done it. Nothing can go wrong. Egg is on board.
I wasn't scared we'd crash or someone would shoot at us. We saw the border guards beneath us and we saw them looking up.
They were looking up at us as they were making their report. What could they do? We were Russians.
And then we were on the way to the Reichstag. Ingo and Holger had to find a place to land.
We made a perfect landing.
We're here. We made it.
I was so happy and excited, I literally went down on my knees and kissed the ground and said, "Thank God it worked, we've made it." Fantastic. I was just happy.
After just 16 minutes from takeoff to landing, the show's over. There's just one more thing they have to do.
We cleared up quickly before they caught us and got out of there. We didn't want to get arrested by the West Berlin police.
So, nochmal eine Keule. Im Kehle. Hallo.
We went straight to the Kurfürstendamm and we downed a quick beer and had a little celebration, because we'd succeeded. Our escape had worked.
October the 7th, East Germany celebrates its 40th birthday. As far as communist leader Erich Honecker is concerned, his country will go on forever. But Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev has different thoughts. Of reforms.
We're shouting out, "Gorby, save us." And that really was the point at which I think the pressure cooker inside East Germany met the reform movement within the Communist Party, and that decisive point arrived where suddenly it was really clear that the Russian bayonets were not going to save Honecker.
We assure our friends all around the world that socialism on German soil, in the land of Marx and Engels, rests on indestructible foundations.
Honecker was deeply resistant to change, not at all interested in compromising, and he felt that the regime was solid. He lived increasingly in a world of fantasy.
Because elsewhere in Eastern Europe, in Poland, Czechoslovakia and Hungary, borders are opening. The electrified fence between Hungary and Austria has been dismantled. Suddenly, East German vacationers have a safe way out.
all on the trees were nails. And they'd hung their keys on them, car keys, house keys. So they left behind. I mean, I live in a house with all kinds of stuff. I can't imagine walking away and leaving it all. That's what they did. That's how badly they wanted to go.
At the West German embassy in Prague, hundreds, then thousands of East Germans take refuge. Finally, they're told that West Germany has agreed to take them in.
I've done it. I can only say I'm a free man.
Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev refuses to act to protect East Germany. His advice?
I believe that dangers lie in wait only for those who fail to react to life.
And nothing would ever have happened in East Germany, nothing would have ever happened in most of Eastern Europe if it hadn't been for the arrival of one man, and that was Gorbachev. This was the first man who said, we are not going to send in the tanks.
But Honecker's regime is not giving in.
We're demonstrating peacefully. We don't want anything bad.
It was the biggest gathering I think they'd ever had. And when you saw that, you realized, wow, if they're out here, they cannot stop this. They can't stop people speaking. They can't stop them gathering. And people are not afraid to gather. It's over. The authorities have lost total control. The genie is out of the bottle. The toothpaste is out of the tube, whatever you want to call it.
East German Politburo spokesman Günter Schabowski announces on November the 9th, 1989, that for the first time, East German citizens can travel abroad freely. A journalist asks him when. He answers, at once. It was a mistake. He should have said tomorrow. The news spreads like wildfire. 3 hours later at the checkpoints, border guards are totally unprepared.
We grabbed all our gear and we raced as fast as we could go to Checkpoint Charlie, and there they were. They were just heaving through. The gates were open, the guards were gone, the people were just pouring through. One gigantic street party, and all these travvies were coming across. These rotten little Trabants were coming across it, and the West Germans were shouting and hollering, and people were hugging. It was a fabulous, fabulous moment.
If anyone had told me I'd see this damn wall come down in my lifetime, I'd have said they were crazy.
But not everyone is happy.
The people over there are talking about reunification. I'm absolutely against that. I'm sure there are lots of good things there, but they have a lot of muck over there too, and I think it should stay there.
East Germany disappeared like a fairy tale, a nasty fairy tale. And I think, to me, that's my chief fascination with the place. It seemed artificial at the time, and now it went like a puff of smoke over a period of just a few days and months.
On October the 3rd, Germany was reunified. It signified the end of the Cold War. During the 28 years the war existed, at least 40,000 people escaped across the border to the west. 75,000 more were prosecuted for trying. Over 1,300 died, including at least 136 in Berlin itself. But the East covered up many deaths so effectively, the exact total is still not known. Today, the Berlin Wall, that symbol of the Iron Curtain, the front line in the Cold War, has disappeared. Remnants can be found in museums around the world, Some pieces ended up as souvenirs. But most of the concrete and steel that formed the wall has been recycled to help rebuild Germany, a once divided country.